and welcome to the New Political's 2020 Election Night live stream. I'm Emily CREBS.
And I'm ZIMMERMAN. We've got a great show for you tonight. We'll be taking a look at absentee voting, looking at some of the races all the way down the Athens County ballot, and we'll be reporting live election results as they come into the newsroom.
We'll also take a look back at the 2000 election for what the late results might look like, as well as dive into a discussion about campaign laws.
But first, we have some early and mail-in voting results. I apologize, we do not have the results in so far. However, we're now going to bring on staff reporter Nathan HART to talk a little bit more about absentee voting, which was a very popular option for many people during the pandemic. Nathan, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on here tonight.
How are you doing, Zach?
I'm doing great. How are you, man?
I'm good.
So, if you could really quickly explain to us what exactly is absentee voting? How exactly does it work in the state of Ohio?
Well, in the state of Ohio, if you want to vote absentee, you have to send a request to your Board of Elections, and then they'll approve it, or they'll send something back that says like something's wrong with it, and then later on they'll send you a ballot. Or you can vote early in person. You also have to apply to absentee for that, I believe. So basically absentee balloting is when you're not voting in person on election day. You're just voting by mail or early voting at some other early voting location.
What does it look like this year? Has there been an increase in the amount of people doing it? What does it look like overall as compared to the past? In
Athens County alone, there's been like 5,000 more absentee ballots requested. There's like 15,000 this year, and there were 10,000 in 2016. So for like the mathematicians at home, that's like a 50% increase. Ohio, as a state, they have 3.4 million ballots requested or voted, turned in early as of yesterday, which is like well over double what it was in 2016. And you gotta keep in mind that like only around 11 million people live in Ohio. So like 3.4 million people already voting early is pretty substantial. That's like almost a third of people already voting.
Would it be safe to say that most students have voted by means of absentee?
I would think so, seeing how the Board of Elections, at least in Athens, Ohio, like the Baker polling center was like a ghost town hall today. There were only like 10 people on the line ever, so I think that's pretty safe to say.
Now, what does that look like for students that have been in quarantine? Have they been able to do so?
Yeah, so students that have been in quarantine, the OU and the Board of Elections, they've teamed up to provide absentee ballots to students in quarantine because they obviously are like required by the university to be in their dorms and they can't leave really. And so the Board of Elections and OU teamed up to get absentee ballot requests or just absentee ballots to people in quarantine. But the deadline for that was October 31st. So if you were like just put into quarantine and you hadn't voted yet, like let's say you got sick Sunday and you're in quarantine now and you hadn't voted, you're probably out of luck unless you sneak out to vote or something. So yeah, they're teaming up to make sure students in quarantine get their absentee ballots.
Now, one of the big questions is, in the state of Ohio, how will the large influx of absentee voting, how will that affect the timeliness of the results?
Well, it really depends on how close it is, and like when people mailed their results. Like, let's say in Ohio, the various Board of Elections can receive mail-in ballots up until November 13th. So that's like 10 days from now that they can still be getting ballots. And if a lot of people mailed them late, and there's like a wide number of votes that are still yet to be counted in Ohio, that means that like it'll be hard to know who won until at least that day. But that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. I feel like most votes in Ohio were already like in Board of Elections by today, because New York Times, I was looking at it, they had 44% of votes in Ohio already in. If that continues at the pace it's been going, then we'll probably have some pretty solid results, if not like a solid like call for a winner tonight.
Absentee ballots that were received up through November 13th, you said, correct?
Yeah.
When are those counted and when are the results released?
Those are counted like right as they receive them, I believe. The results, official results, I believe official results, because everything coming out right now is technically unofficial. The official results don't come out until later in November, so, but I'm pretty sure when they just receive a ballot, they just add it to the tally whenever they get it. Like November 13th will be the last day that they'll be adding any new votes, possibly.
That was staff reporter Nathan Hart. Nathan, thank you so much for
Yep.
coming on. I appreciate it.
Yep.
The presidential election is what's on most people's minds tonight as we head later into the evening. Looking locally, although Trump took most of the state of Ohio, Hillary Clinton won Athens County with about 55% of the vote in 2016. Trump trailed behind with about 38% of the vote. The Athens County Board of Elections reported that the turnout for 2016 was about 66%. Compared to former President Barack Obama, however, Clinton received nearly 10% less of the vote in Athens County. Obama won Athens County in both 2008 and 2012. He beat out Republican challenger Mitt Romney in 2012 with 66.6% of the vote, as well as John McCain in 2008 with 66.6% of the vote. We're about to go into a break. We'll be back with you shortly, and we will be delivering any Athens County Board of Election results that we have at that time. Welcome back to the New Politicals 2020 General Election live stream. I'm here with opinion editor Charlotte CALDWELL. Welcome. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm all right. Charlotte, could you introduce yourself a little bit to our viewers?
Yeah, so I'm a junior and I'm a journalism major, and I've been doing opinion for 3 years since I started at OU.
And Charlotte, you watched both of the presidential debates this
Yes.
year. What were your thoughts on them?
So I think the first one, as everybody else thought also, that it was kind of a cringeworthy affair from start to finish. So as I said in like the counter opinion that we published right after the debate, the only thing that an undecided voter would have taken from it is which candidate showed the most civility towards each other. And then also in that counter I said that Chris Wallace made an effective attempt to get the debate on track, but after I saw Kristen Welker's performance in the second debate, I thought that he kind of probably should have done more to keep the conversation going. And maybe with his questions too, he probably would have had a better attempt at getting them back on track. And then also I think the Commission on Presidential Debates probably should have done more. Like they did in the second debate, they muted their microphones. So I think that was a good decision on their part. It helped a couple times for them. And then I think our opinion writers in that counter had a lot to say after that debate. So they had it's probably the longest counter we've ever published with over 3,000 words. So it was a very good discussion, and it was a very diverse discussion. But there was a pretty clear consensus that nobody won. It was really just a bunch of talk back and forth. But if there had to be one winner, people would say that Trump won because he made Biden lose his train of thought like all the time. So, and then we all recognize that Chris Wallace had like a losing battle, but then he probably could have done a little better to resume civility. But yeah, I think everybody would agree that the second debate was definitely better. There were a lot of points made, and Kristen Welker did a good job of keeping everybody on track.
And what were your thoughts on the vice presidential debate as well, since obviously that was with two different temperament?
Right, yeah, so I think the vice president debate was definitely interesting. I don't know about the moderator didn't really stand out to me in that one. I know that like Chris Wallace and Kristen Welker like stood out to me a lot, but then like Susan Page didn't really do anything to make me think that she had good questions, but like it wasn't a standout job to me. And then of course like the fly on Mike Pence's head was always something to be told on the internet. And then another thing about Kamala Harris, when she said like I'm speaking, a lot of people got really like defensive about that on social media. They thought that was a really good thing on her point or on her part, but I didn't really see that as like a big highlight of the debate. I think they both made really good points, but just the fact that the internet can focus on like the fly and Kamala Harris saying like what she said makes me think that people should have done more in the debate. Like Harris and Pence both should have done more to get clear to voters what they stand for. So.
And with so much high early voting turnout and absentee voting, do you think that the debates really had an impact on the opinions that voters have of presidential candidates?
I think the second one probably did, but the first one not really, because just like I said before, they kind of talked over each other, and then there wasn't really any like points got across very well. But then the vice presidential debate, as some of our opinion writers said in the counter that we did, we could be looking at like our future presidents with them, because the health and age of Biden and Trump, they're getting up there in age, so they could have the vice presidents take over. So I think the vice presidential debate was definitely important to watch this time around compared to others. So.
And in general, do you think the debates are really helpful for voters to understand maybe the platforms of candidates?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. It also depends on like the moderator and what questions they ask, because I think Kristen Welker did a good job at asking like general baseline questions that everybody cares about. So.
And then as for the presidential campaigns, was there anything that the candidates did on the campaign trail that really stuck out to you as having an impact on voters?
Yeah, so I think this time around, like, I don't usually pay attention to the political ads, especially for presidential candidates, because I think they usually know what they stand for. But this time they really, especially Trump, had a lot of like charged ads, like politically charged ads against Biden. And it might turn people off and like persuade them to vote for, you know, Biden or Trump. But there was one article one ad in particular where Trump took Fauci out of context, like Dr. Anthony Fauci out of context. And actually Justin Thompson, our opinion writer, wrote about this a couple weeks ago. And he was saying that, or Fauci sounded like he was saying that he was praising Trump for his coronavirus efforts when he was really praising like healthcare workers. So I think like that kind of like lie or half truth, I guess, would make voters not really turn to Trump, especially seeing what he's done with coronavirus. And then like Biden's ads are not really as inflammatory, but like him just with sunglasses, like his aviator sunglasses, walking down like an aisle in slow motion is not really something that would appeal to me. So I don't know, I just think that the ads were definitely different this year.
Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty with what's going to happen tonight. What do you predict the coming weeks have in store for our tumultuous political climate?
So I think no matter what the predictions say, like the polls, I think the race is going to be still close, and I think we won't know for multiple days like who won. But no matter who wins, there's probably going to be civil unrest in the country, and we're just going to have to like take it in stride. But with all the talks of like the new civil war on social media and all the memes that have come out, I'd be shocked if nothing happens. But we can only hope that nothing will happen of it. So.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
We'll see you back in a little bit.
All right, thanks.
We're now going to shift from the presidential race to the Ohio 15th Congressional District race between incumbent Representative Steve Stivers and challenger Joel Newby. Zach, you've spent some time before the start of the pandemic covering the early days of Newby's campaign. Could you give me a rundown on each of the candidates' platforms?
Yeah, so I covered Mr. Newby's campaign a little bit from the very beginning, since he announced it, since he ran in a primary against Daniel Kilgore. Mr. Newby is obviously a liberal Democrat. He, back during the primary, endorsed Elizabeth Warren. He has he has supported policies that include obviously putting money towards better infrastructure, towards the 15th district, and he claims he does not support Medicare for all, but he supports universal health care. So he's obviously more liberal. Mr. Stivers is obviously the incumbent. He is a Republican. He has previously held a leadership position with the Republican caucus in Congress. He, for the most part, has voted in line with President Trump. On occasion, if a lot of Republicans break away in certain scenarios, most notably, he was against President Trump pulling troops out of northern Syria, but for the most part, he supports his policies. And so, they're two very different candidates for the 15th district. So.
And what could Athens look like if Stivers wins re-election?
Well, if Representative Stivers wins, they would have the same representative they've had for nearly a decade now. He ideologically is more aligned with voters in more rural parts of the 15th district throughout South and South Central Ohio. Obviously, if Mr. Newby won the election, he would be much more aligned with residents of the city of Athens and Athens County, especially students here at Ohio University.
So obviously this election and this campaign trail have been completely unprecedented. What have the campaigns of these two candidates looked like?
They've done some traveling, only a little bit though. Mr. Newby did visit Ohio University a couple times. Mr. Stivers will post stuff on his social media of visiting parts throughout the district as well. Obviously, a lot of it was virtual, it was socially distanced, and a lot of it was more from a social media platform and not as much in person as you normally would see. So they, of course, they debated about a month ago, and that was the most like in-person, close contact they've had. Obviously, that was mostly done through a live stream. So.
Okay, and what were some of the highlights from that debate?
So at that debate, they focused on a small range of topics. Obviously, the pandemic was one of the most notable topics. They also covered healthcare a great deal. Mr. Newby was very critical of Mr. Stivers with regards to the pandemic. Mr. Stivers had a message on his website that said, if you are not sick, do not wear a mask, which is factually wrong. They were very critical of each other when it comes to healthcare. Obviously, like I said, they had very conflicting beliefs. Mr. Stivers has voted against the Affordable Care Act many times. Mr. Newby would take it a step further with universal health care. So they are two very different candidates. So yeah.
And do you know how many people attended that debate? Was there a count at all?
There was no count of who was there other than Mr. Newby, Mr. Stivers, the moderator, and a couple other people that were there to help host it. It was on a live YouTube live stream whenever me and one of our young reporters, Audrey Wild, also covered it. So yeah, like most of the campaign, it was done through some type of remote or virtual manner. So.
Okay. And do you think that the results of that debate could have impacted maybe voter sentiment for Newby and Stivers?
It's possible. Mr. Newby did try to go on the offensive throughout most of the debate. There was no, clear points of, bickering. The debate did not get out of hand like we saw in the first presidential debate, but there was clearly stark differences between the two. And they were both, it appeared to be aiming for, gathering support from their respective ideologies and not entirely focused on the middle ground. It's interesting because if you look at both the candidates, they grew up, where they were born, where they grew up, where they currently live, their lives have been spent entirely within the 15th district of Ohio. And that is something that Mr. Newby has put a lot of emphasis on, but it is truthful for both of them. And they now both live up around Columbus. So it was interesting to see similarities yet the clear differences between the two candidates.
Well, thank you, Zach.
Of course. That's what I do. Now we All right. We have results coming in. We have absentee results here now from Athens County for president and vice president. Joe Biden with 71% of the vote in Athens County for absentee ballots. Of course, President Trump with 27%. And we have some other races here. The 6th Congressional District, the Republican Bill Johnson, 63% to 36% against the Democrat Shauna Roberts. For the 15th District, absentee vote, Joel Newby, 70% of the vote. Steve Stivers with 28% of the vote. We have some other results here. For State Senator, Democrat Christian Johnson at 63%, Republican Tim Schaefer, 36%. I'm going to say this again to make it clear. This is the results from absentee ballots. So these are not the full results. We may not know those results for a while, but I'm going to put emphasis again on the fact that for the absentee ballots, Joel Newby, 70% of absentee ballots. That is a very large lead, larger than I would have anticipated, that's for sure. And we have other results here. I apologize for the slight delay as I zoom in. State Representative, 94th District, the Republican Jay Edwards with 31% of absentee ballots. Katie O'Neill, the Democrat, 68%. County Commissioner Charlie Adkins, 70%. The independent challenging him, Bill Hayes, has 29%. The other county commissioner race, Chris Schmiel with 100%. He was unopposed. And there are a couple other smaller elections. State Senator, 30th District, Frank Hoagland, 26%. His challenger, the Democrat Michael Fletcher, 73%. Of course, absentee ballots. And I apologize, I keep zooming out here. State Representative, 78th District, Charlotte Owens, the Democrat, 63%. The Republican Brian Stewart with 36% of the absentee ballots. And we have one more round of results coming in right here. For prosecuting attorney Keller Blackburn, who is unopposed, obviously has 100%. Clerk for the Court of Common Pleas, Candy Russell, unopposed. Sheriff Rodney Smith, unopposed. County Recorder Jessica Markins, unopposed. County Treasurer Rick Wasserman, unopposed. So they all obviously, that doesn't need to be said, they have 100% of the votes for absentee ballots. We have even more results. Jeff Maiden, County Engineer, unopposed. There's several unopposed races, obviously. Member for his State Board of Education, 9th District, Ron Hood, 27%. Michelle Newman, 72%. And we have some results for the Ohio State Supreme Court. John P. O'Donnell is currently up in absentee ballots with 60%, as compared to Sharon L. Kennedy, who has 39%. And for the state Supreme Court, we also have Jennifer Brunner with 74%, who is up over Judy French with 25%. And we still have more. I apologize. There are more than I thought. Let's see here. Judge for the Court of Appeals, Stacey Brooks, 72% to 27% over Christy Wilkin. Judge of the Common Court of Pleas, Pat Lang, unopposed, 100%. Judge of the Court of Common Pleas, right now Zachary Saunders is up with 66%. over Kenneth Ryan with 33%. The New Political did cover their debate a while back. Zachary Saunders with 66% of the absentee vote. City of Athens income tax levy, for the income tax, 75% to nearly 25% against the income tax here in the city of Athens. And we have even more results coming in. We have results for some of the other towns around Athens, in Athens County. We obviously are here to talk about Athens. Don't know if there's anything more. Those are all the absentee ballot results that we have right now. There will be surely a lot more coming in over the course of the night. So we have yet to see the grand scheme of things. Right now, there are several candidates that have very large leads among absentee ballots.
We're going to take a short break and be back with you in a little bit. Welcome back to the New Politicals 2020 Election Night live stream. So for Athens County, the Board of Elections is reporting that the absentee votes that were received by the Board of Elections by tonight have Joe Biden in the lead with 71.23% of the vote, Trump with 27.1% of the vote. The representative of the congressional 15th district, they report Joel Newby had 70.98% of the vote, Steve Stivers with 28.96% of the vote. Representative of the congressional 6th district, 63.85% of the vote is to Bill Johnson, 36.15% of the vote to Shauna Roberts. The state senate 30th district, Michael Fletcher has 73.12% of the vote, Frank Hoagland with 26.88% of the vote. State representative for the 94th district, Katie O'Neill in the lead with 68.72% of the vote, and Jay Edwards with 31.28% of the vote. And for the Ohio Supreme Court, Sharon Kennedy has 39.97% of the vote. John O'Donnell with 60.03% of the vote. And Jennifer Brunner has 74.28% of the vote. And Judy French with 25.72% of the vote. And we want to emphasize that these are unofficial absentee results. So the Board of Elections could be receiving more absentee votes in the coming days. And the New York Times is also reporting that Steve Stivers has won the congressional 15th district race against Joel Newby.
Thank you for that recap, Emily. So let's talk a little bit about the 2020 general election a little bit. So obviously we've been hearing a lot about how we might not know the results of the election by tonight. Now, this is reminding many viewers out there of the 2000 presidential election in which George Bush and Dick Cheney defeated Al Gore and Joe Lieberman. So, and that election was obviously decided by an absurdly thin margin. So you obviously know more about this than I do. If you could explain to our viewers, like, what was that like sitting through an election when we did not know the results that night?
Right, so election night in 2000. So most Americans knew that it was going to be a close race between Gore and Bush. But there was one thing that they thought they knew for certain, and something that my mom always likes to remind me when she's discussing the 2000 election. It's that Americans were almost positive they were going to know who the next president was going to be at the end of the night. That was not the case. So the race was, as I said, it was expected to be close in many states, including Florida, which is a key battleground state tonight. Early in the night, many news organizations reported that Florida had gone to Gore. But as the night went on, that was actually retracted, and they reported it went to Bush. And when they got the final election results that night from Florida, the margin was extremely small. Less than like 600 votes separated Bush and Gore, and because there needed to be a recount, most of the news organizations did report that they really did not know who had won the presidential election because neither candidate had gotten to the magic number of 270 electoral votes.
So Florida is obviously a toss-up, as is the state of Ohio, as is the state of Pennsylvania. Florida is currently neck and neck right now, Ohio is as well. But in this particular situation, why were the results in Florida so contentious?
Okay, so in Florida they were using paper ballots, and I feel like all of our viewers have probably heard the term hanging chads. And so when they were punching the holes in these ballots, some of the punches didn't go all the way through. And then there were also these things called pregnant chads, which were not really completely pierced paper, like there was an indent thing that come out. And this led to overvotes, where sometimes there was multiple votes for one office, and there were also undervotes, which were a huge issue, where they could not really discern what the voter intended to vote based on how the punch was in their ballot. And as the Florida recounts went on, it was people actually hand recounting these in a lot of counties, and that created a lot of controversy over what counts as a vote and what doesn't count as a vote.
That election was ultimately decided by lawsuits, and in the ensuing Supreme Court case, Bush v. Gore. Correct.
Correct.
So, given that was such a close race, the state of Florida was decided by 538 votes in the entire state, and we are currently witnessing a large amount of states, larger than normal, that would be considered toss-up states. Could we possibly see anything similar to that this year?
So one thing that made this election really interesting and kind of controversial was the fact that the Supreme Court essentially said on December 12th that they were going to stop doing the recounts, and Bush had won Florida. As we are waiting for each state, which probably has a different method for counting mail-in and absentee voting, it's going to take a while before we know the official totals. But we've already seen lawsuits about mail-in voting, so it's entirely plausible that something could happen that is going to essentially put this election into the court system.
What would you tell the viewers who are watching this and watching on any other network that are patiently waiting to see the results, who are concerned they do not know the results yet?
I would say expect this to be potentially election month rather than just election day, and to keep being patient.
Emily, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, we are going to give an update.
We're not getting an update, we're getting me instead.
All right, moving more locally, let's take a look at the Ohio and House and Ohio Senate races going on right now here in Athens. Staff reporter Nathan Hart is back to talk with us. Nathan, welcome back. Who are the candidates who ran in, I believe it was the Senate, the 30th Senate District, the 94th House District? Could you talk about those candidates with us for a little
so
bit?
we got Frank Hoagland is the Senate candidate. He's a Republican, and we have Michael Fletcher, who's a Democrat. And right now, Hoagland is ahead vote-wise. I think he's. I don't know if they've made any calls yet, but I would offer that I think he's going to win. And for the 94th district, we have Katie O'Neill and Jay Edwards. And Jay Edwards is currently winning, I believe, because while Katie O'Neill has an advantage in Athens City, Jay Edwards, the area as a whole favors Edwards a lot more. So I think it would be hard for O'Neill to pull ahead of Edwards at this point, but it's certainly still a possibility.
Now, there's been a lot of drama over the course of this year about the Democratic candidate for the 94th District. Katie O'Neill was not originally on the ballot. Could you give us a rundown of that whole spiel?
Yeah, so basically she was on the ballot, but then the Board of Elections removed her from the ballot because they found out that she hadn't been living in Athens County for a year. But then in April, the Ohio Supreme Court reversed that ruling and put her back on the ballot because the Supreme Court found that she had been living in Athens County for a year. So she's been on the ballot ever since then, and that was a whole big thing because the Athens Board of Election just voted unanimously to remove her. And then she sued and then went to the Supreme Court, and now she's back on the ballot.
Another major controversy that's been going on, if you live in the state of Ohio, I'm sure you've heard all about it, is the House Bill 6 controversy. Now, recently, we have heard O'Neill's opponent, Jay Edwards, we've heard his name come up related to that controversy. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically, Householder was arrested in July for corruption charges because he had a whole scheme going on where he was getting paid off by First Energy, allegedly. And he was using First Energy money to stay Speaker of the House and to pass House Bill 6, which was a bailout for First Energy's plants. And the reason Jay Edwards his name has been floating around when we talk about this sort of thing is because Jay Edwards is the majority whip, which means he was like very close to Householder, like they worked together a lot. Jay Edwards was like one of Householder's like biggest supporters before all this came out. And then back in July, Jay Edwards said he was shocked to find out that all this Householder stuff, like he didn't know. And so far, I believe, I think the FBI, I believe they said that like they're not looking into Jay Edwards for anything. But his name's been wrapped up in it because he's been working so close with Householder for a good amount of time now that people obviously were wondering if he was involved in some way.
So obviously O'Neill not being on the ballot, Edwards, the question of whether or not he had any involvement with the House Bill 6 scandal. Do you think any of either of these controversies can have a real impact on this House election?
I don't really think so. I think House District 94 is a pretty solid Republican district. It's gone Edwards for a while. He's been in the House for a while. And while Athens might vote Democrat pretty much in every election, that's not enough to overwhelm the rest of the area surrounding Athens that votes Republican. So I think these controversies, unless something really, really bad came out against Jay Edwards or O'Neill, I think there was really no way that like the election was going to be swayed that much.
Staff reporter Nathan Hart. Nathan, thanks again for coming back on. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a little bit. Thank you.
We are back with the New Politicals 2020 election night live stream. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I mean, what can you say? It's election night 2020, they're bound to happen. Okay, so we have the unofficial precinct results from the Athens County Board of Elections.
We're down again. I don't know if I should just start it again. Like, I just don't want to stop the stream. But I don't know if I have any other, like, real option. I'm gonna just hit stop.
Welcome back to the New Politicals 2020 election night live stream. We apologize for the technical difficulties. At this point in 2020, it's to be expected. So we have the unofficial final results from the Athens County Board of Elections. For President and Vice President, Joe Biden has 56.47% of the vote. Donald Trump has 41.75% of the vote. Representative to the Congressional 6th District, Bill Johnson has 76.68% of the vote. Shawn Roberts has 23.3% of the vote. The representative to the 15th Congressional District, Joel Newby, has 57.79% of the vote. Steve Stivers has 42.16% of the vote. For the state senator for the 20th District, Christian Johnson has 47.6% of the vote, and Tim Schaefer with 52.4% of the vote. For the state senator 30th District, Michael Fletcher has 59.89% of the vote, Frank Hoagland with 40.11% of the vote. State representative for the 94th District, Jay Edwards, has 44.45% of the vote, and Katie O'Neill has 55.55% of the vote. State representative for the 79th District, Charlotte Owens, has 47.75% of the vote. Brian Stewart has 52.25% of the vote. In the contested county commissioner's race, Charlie Adkins has 62.6% of the vote, and Bill Hayes has 37.4% of the vote. And for the Ohio Justice of the Supreme Court, Sharon Kennedy has 46.46% of the vote. John O'Donnell has 53.54% of the vote. And in the other Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court race, Jennifer Brunner has 68.6% of the vote, and Judy French has 31.94% of the vote. And just a reminder, these are unofficial results and they do not include provisional ballots. Okay. We're going to bring on Emily Zeiler, who is the New Political's unofficial law expert. She has been looking into campaign laws. Emily, how are you faring tonight?
A little stressed, but aren't we all?
Yes, Emily's actually helping us produce this live stream, and she's doing a wonderful job. Okay. So Emily, what are some notable campaign finance laws in Ohio?
So I pretty much chose two that is probably like what the public wants to know. So under the OEC, also known as the Ohio Election Commission, they have like a wide set of rules, like pages upon pages that no one wants to read through. let me just say it took me hours today. But it covers everything financial for a campaign race. So the biggest one, and what most people would probably say is common sense, is for campaign money to be raised, it's only supposed to be solely used for a campaign race itself. And in the second campaign rule that I thought was probably the most important for people to know is that each campaign has to report every single thing that they raised and what they used it for. So like that can be television ads or just yard signs.
And are these public record?
Yes. All these are public record and anyone can actually look it up and see who specifically donated. It can be an individual or a corporation.
So if you want to look and see what your favorite candidate spent their finances on, you can. And how have these laws applied to the 2020 election?
These laws apply to every campaign, whether it be the presidential election or just your local state races. So with the coronavirus pandemic itself, one thing that was most notable is that the methods of which people are doing things are different. So instead of having in-person meet and greets or rallies, well, President Trump has still been having rallies, but people have been doing more print products, whether it be t-shirts, which has been a very popular thing with the Biden campaign, as well as yard signs and just door-to-door brochures, which a lot of people are an individual grassroots level go around and canvas.
Okay. And what are some of the things we can learn about candidates themselves from how they spent their finance money?
We can learn a few things from campaign finance levels, records. So the biggest thing, which is why campaign finance laws came to be, was that so FDR, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt, back in, I believe it was the 1930s. I'm blanking on that right now. Either way, there was a big monopolies that were rising around at this time, and a lot of corporations were meddling in campaigns. So that pretty much that and how corporations meddle and stuff has came to campaign finance laws. And one of the things that's most important, definitely with one of our presidential candidates, Donald J. Trump, is that we saw even foreign involvement in this. So the impeachment process, which occurred last year, a couple months ago, it was actually found out because people went for campaign finance records and saw 2 people that were from Ukraine. And so that's pretty much the most important thing that comes from campaign finance records. Other than that, everything's just a little itty-bitty things that people get to know the names in their platforms.
Okay. And it actually seems like these campaign finance laws have been pretty important in Ohio this year with our former Ohio Speaker of the House, Larry Householder.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk to me a little bit about how Householder violated campaign finance laws?
So previously in the live stream, House Bill 6 was brought up. So House Bill 6 was just a $1 billion bailout for 2 of First Energy's nuclear power plants in Ohio. So Householder, obviously, he hasn't been convicted yet, but he's been suspected of bribery with these. And since he's being charged and is currently going through court, he has paid nearly $1 million from his campaign fund to pay his criminal defense lawyers. Well, the Attorney General of Ohio, Dave Yost, he is not very happy about this. This breaks the basic law of using campaign money for things that aren't your actual campaign. His bribery case, that is completely separate. So the fact that he's using that money to pay for criminal defense lawyers is against campaign finance laws.
It's very, very interesting. Well, thank you so much for your time, Emily, and keep up the awesome work tonight.
Thank you. And you too, CREBS.
Thank you. We are now going to have on our editor-in-chief, Sarah Donaldson, who is one of our resident proud Pennsylvanians. She's going to talk to us a little bit about the race in Pennsylvania. So what makes Pennsylvania unique to the 2020 election?
Yeah, so it's always been a swing state. Pennsylvania's been back and forth, and both presidential candidates have really focused in on Pennsylvania in the last couple of weeks just because they know Pennsylvania's got a good amount of electoral votes, and it's very much bound to flip for Biden, or it could stay for Trump. The state went for Trump in 2016, but by like 1%. It was a real small margin. So it's really interesting, and kind of going back to your earlier segment about the 2000 election and results reporting, because there's so many mail-in ballots coming in because of the coronavirus pandemic, the way that Pennsylvania reports its mail-in ballots is a little bit different. They're actually not going to start reporting mail-in ballots till a lot later than some other states. For example, here in Ohio, we already know the results of some of those absentee voting, so early voting as well as mail-in ballots, whereas in Pennsylvania, they didn't even start processing them till today, if I'm correct.
Okay. Very interesting. Have you heard any projections of when we might start hearing about those mail-in ballot results?
So I have to look back. 538 had a really awesome project where they kind of put together all 50 states, and they said this is when you're probably going to hear back from results. And here it says for Pennsylvania, timing of results, it'll be slow going. So although you know, we're going to hear a little bit tonight, it says 538 says overall election officials estimate that the overwhelming majority of votes will be counted by Friday. So it could be a couple of days. And the other thing that 538 pointed out was, you know, Biden voters are probably a little bit more likely to vote by mail, whereas Trump voters are a little more likely to vote in person. So Pennsylvania could look toward Trump tonight and then flip for Biden by the end of the week, just depending on how those mail-in ballots pan out. So it's really going to be interesting to watch. And like you kind of said, it's not really, I mean, we're looking at results right now. I know everyone's sitting at home, like refreshing the New York Times or watching live reporting of it, but it really seems like we may not know Pennsylvania tonight.
And so you touched on it a little bit, but how does Pennsylvania's voting system compare to Ohio's?
So Pennsylvania, to my understanding, does not have necessarily early voting in the same way that Ohio does. At least that's how I understood it when I lived in Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania. My parents live in Pennsylvania. So they voted in Pennsylvania, and I voted in my first election in Pennsylvania. So I drove back for election day just because I wanted to vote in person for my first election. But you know, with Ohio, you have early voting, and you can really go early vote for any reason. I'm pretty sure in Pennsylvania that's not necessarily the case. I don't want to be quoted on that. I don't want to be wrong. But I'm pretty sure in Pennsylvania that's not the case. And there were a lot of people voting by mail in this election, but there were also a lot of slip-ups. I had a friend who lives in the same county as me, Butler County in Pennsylvania. She didn't get her ballot. She requested it several weeks ago, didn't get it till like 2 nights ago. And it was actually reported on that Butler County lost a bunch of those ballots. So again, when you don't have that like extra cushion of early voting, a lot of people were probably turning out today to vote. But additionally, with those mail-in ballots, there's been a lot of slip-ups with mail-in ballots, and it's also very different in how they count those ballots. So.
And what does winning Pennsylvania mean for either candidate?
It's huge, and both candidates realize that. They spent a lot of time, I would say more so than Ohio, campaigning in Pennsylvania this election season. I know Joe Biden was at the University of Pittsburgh last night. He was with Lady Gaga. I had some friends meet Lady Gaga, which I'm so jealous about. And President Trump was in Butler County, my home county, on Saturday. They've been all over Pennsylvania. I saw Joe Biden's wife, Dr. Joe Biden. She was at like Sheets posting about it. So they both know how important Pennsylvania is going to be. You know, speaking Sunday in Philadelphia, Biden said, "My message is simple. Pennsylvania is critical in this election." Trump told supporters in Allentown on October 26th, "By the way, we win Pennsylvania, we win this whole thing." So, you know, Pennsylvania and Ohio are neighbors. They're both swing states, but Pennsylvania is definitely looking a little bit more of a toss-up and a little bit more important tonight.
Okay. And do you know how many electoral votes Pennsylvania has?
I think it's 20.
Okay.
Let me check for you. But I do believe it is 20 electoral votes. Now I'm curious.
And that's comparing with Ohio that has 18.
Yep, 20 electoral votes. And only about, New York Times is reporting about 20% of estimated votes reported in Pennsylvania right now. So it's definitely going to be a long going.
Okay. Well, thank you so much,
Yeah.
Sarah. And thank you for your work tonight and keeping this show going.
Of course.
Right. We're going to take a break, and we will be back with the New Politicals Election Night live stream.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us tonight. We have some unofficial final results coming out of Athens County. For the presidential election, Joe Biden with 56% of the vote to President Donald Trump's 41%. Representative to Congress for the 6th District of Ohio, Republican Bill Johnson, 76% to Shauna Roberts is 23%. The 15th District, Democrat Joel Newby with 57% to Steve Stivers, 42% here in the county of Athens. State Senator, 20th District, Democrat Christian N. Johnson with 47%. Republican Tim Schaefer with 52%. State Senator for 30th District, we've got Democrat Michael Fletcher with 59% to 40% for the Republican Frank Hoagland. The 94th House District, the Republican Jay Edwards with 44%, and the Democrat Katie O'Neill leads with 55% here in Athens County. The 78th District for State Representatives, Democrat Charlotte Owens with 47%, Republican Brian Stewart with 52%. County Commissioner Charlie Adkins, the incumbent Democrat, with 62% to 37% for the independent challenger Bill Hayes. And we've got a couple more results here for the Ohio State Supreme Court. The incumbent Sharon L. Kennedy currently down with 46% to John P. O'Donnell with 53%. And Jennifer Brunner is currently up in Athens County with 68% to 31% to Judy French. For the judge of the Court of Common Pleas, Kenneth Ryan, 39%, Zachary Saunders, 60%. Zachary Saunders currently leading Kenneth Ryan. Those results are unofficial final results here in Athens County. And now I shall bring on our opinion writer, Charlotte Caldwell. Charlotte, thank you so much for coming back on.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about polling. So there's obviously been a lot of talk in this year's election about polls. 2016, the national polls predicted Hillary Clinton would win. Obviously, Donald Trump won. Donald Trump won the state of Ohio by 8 percentage points or so. So let me ask you, back in 2016, were you surprised at how the polls were wrong? And do you think there is any correlation to what we're seeing so far in 2020?
So yeah, it was definitely a bit of a shock for me then, because I had like a natural trust for the polls, but I was also 16 years old, so I wasn't really up to speed on the elections. See, I always thought that they would be researched enough to be mostly right. I wasn't sure like how it necessarily worked, but again, like I was too young to remember elections previous. But I think it definitely has an influence on people's trust in this election. Like, they don't really trust what the polls are going to say. So, yeah, I think it has a lot of impact on this election.
Why do you think they were off the way they were in 2016, especially here in Ohio?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think one of the articles I read said that a lot of like undecided voters changed their minds. But I think there might be more to it than just that. Then of course it depends on like what the Electoral College does and everything. So
obviously we have yet to see final results for this year's presidential election in Ohio or nationally. Do you think the polling will be any more accurate this year? Do you think it'll still be off? What's your take on that?
I think that they probably learned from their mistakes in 2016. So then. Well, like for example, 538 was still predicting that Biden was favored to beat Trump, but then they also said that Trump has like a 1 in 10 chance of winning, which I think it might be a little off, because I think he probably has a little bit greater of a chance, just judging by the map currently. It looks like he's going to win a couple big ticket states. So I think that like they're probably accurate for the most part, and even like 538 said like before that they were accurate on the popular vote, but then they weren't accurate on the electoral votes. So I think that for the most part they're accurate, but there's some cases where they, are a little bit off.
What's your take on the polls in a state like Ohio that we know is going to be incredibly close? It's hard to tell. What do you think that the chance is likely or unlikely that they'll be accurate, or do you think that everything will remain in the margin of error, that there's no way of knowing?
I think it'll be mostly accurate, just because like a state like Ohio has like a history in the past of doing like the same thing over and over. So I think some states especially are going to be more predictable than others. But yeah, I think that for the most part they'll get it right.
That's our opinion editor, Charlotte Caldwell. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.
Should I get on screen?
I would like to welcome my former managing editor from last year, Mr. Cole Behrens. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Zach.
Cole, you were working tonight, it says, at Alexander High School, correct?
Yes, I was.
What was that like?
Well, I was working with the Associated Press to report as a stringer, just read the election results. It was interesting. They just posted the tickers of the voting machines on the doors outside, and I called AP's line, sat on hold for about 10 minutes, and they actually, since I had a summary total and not a precinct total, I kind of made the system a bit wonky, and they needed a supervisor to help me with that. So, but overall, I think it was a pretty smooth process, but that's maybe a little bit different than in the previous experiences I've had with voting.
Yeah. What's going through your mind in such a high stress situation, and an election is going to be as tight as Ohio is?
When I was out there today, I was just trying to do my job. I know you're a sports editor, you'll probably hear that line a lot from athletes, but it really is just, you're trying to do the job that impartially and objectively, and in terms of today, I'm just trying to read numbers and call those numbers in.
How did this experience for you compare to other experiences as far as elections, covering elections, especially primaries earlier this year?
Yeah.
What's the differences? What was that like?
Yeah, so for the Cincinnati Enquirer, I covered the Kentucky primaries in in August, in July, and those were interesting because obviously they had sorted out the coronavirus by then, but before that, I had done the primaries for Ohio when the Secretary of State Frank LaRose had tried to suspend the election the day before, but it had changed. That was when I was with the dispatch, and it was definitely interesting trying to navigate that because it was an all hands on deck type situation, and I was working from home. But today it was good to be out in person, back when I was covering the Kentucky primary.
That was Cole Behrens, everybody. Cole, thank you so much
Thank
for joining
you.
us. It's greatly appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
We are going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Dude, that was not in your joke.
Oh, shit.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for staying tuned in to us. We have the final results once again out of Athens County. These are the unofficial final results. Joe Biden with 56% of the vote here in Athens County compared to President Donald Trump's 41%.
In the race for the representative for the 6th congressional district, Bill Johnson has 76.68% of the vote. Shauna Roberts has 23.32% of the vote.
For Ohio's 15th district for United States House of Representatives, Jill Newby took 57% of Athens County, while the incumbent representative, Republican Steve Stivers, took 42% of the vote.
And in the race for the state senator for the 20th district, Christian Johnson has 47% of the vote, and Tim Schaefer has 52%.
And we've got plenty of other results right here. For state senator for the 30th district, Democrat Michael Fletcher took 59% of the vote in Athens County. Republican Frank Hoagland, the incumbent, took 40% of the vote.
And in the race for the state representative of the 94th district, Jay Edwards has 44% of the vote, and Katie O'Neill 55% for Athens County.
State representative for the 78th district, Democrat Charlotte Owens with 47% of the vote, and Republican Brian Stewart with 52% of the vote.
And in the race for Athens County Commissioner, Charlie Adkins has 62% of the vote, and independent Bill Hayes has 37%.
We've also got the Ohio State Supreme Court Justice elections. Sharon L. Kennedy with 46% of the vote to John P. O'Donnell's 53% of the vote.
And in the other spot for the Ohio Supreme Court, Jennifer Brunner has 68% of the vote, and Judy French 31%.
We've also got Judge of the Court of Common Pleas. Right now, the unofficial final results for Athens County, Zachary Saunders takes 60% to Ken Ryan's 39%. And that is all we've got for Athens County final results. Right now, for the presidential election, Donald Trump is currently up in the state of Ohio against Joe Biden. He's currently leading 51.8 to 46.8%. We've currently got 74% of estimated votes reported for the entire electoral college. Joe Biden currently leads 131 to 108.
According to the New York Times.
According to the New York Times, of course. That is all from us for our live stream. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on this historical night for our country as well as the state of Ohio. Stay tuned in to our social media as we will be giving another update around midnight on potential final results for the state of Ohio. Thank you.
Stay safe and stay patient.